I have been training in dance for over 30 years, primarily in classical ballet. In my professional career, I mostly performed contemporary ballet. Contemporary meaning of today. So it could be pretty much anything, as long as it came out of that classical structure of ballet and then went from there. So it would often involve movement from modern dance. Or jazz dance. Of course, there are other criteria and restrictions that go into creating dance. You would, even if you had total free reign, you would still need to know certain things, like, what is the surface of the floor? How much space do I have? How many dancers do I have? Other logistical things, too. So a dance that I created last year for a local student dance company, the company gave me a lot of criteria. They said they wanted classical ballet, 5 dancers, and they told me who those dancers were. They're all students at the studio where I teach. And they had a certain costume in mind, so I knew what that would look like and how it would move. And then I knew about how much time and effort I was willing to put into it based on what I was getting paid and whatnot. And then I knew around how long it should be. So I had all these criteria. And then for me, my choreography tends to come out of the music. I listen to music, and then the movement is inspired. So I started with the criteria, and then all I had to do was narrow down the music, and I found this beautiful song. And these are my students. So there are some things that I wanted to work on with them, such as showing off their backs to the audience. When I do pretty simple choreography like this, sometimes I like to have them do different spatial patterns. So here they took their diagonal lines into a V and then flattened out into this horizontal line. And they're working on keeping their spacing. The most important thing that I needed to do with this choreography, the overall theme, was that it looked like they were dancing with their friends. Okay, good. Let's go to the end of the dance. We're skipping ahead, and even though I really like the middle of the dance, they all have a little solo. I just want you to see the repetition of a couple of motifs. Choreography here with the turns where they show off their backs. Now I think anything like this that's kind of folksy looks like they're having fun, so it lends itself to that concept of they're dancing with their friends. And here's the big climactic moment. The kids love to leap. The audience usually loves a good leap. It's all big and exciting. But it's really short, because that's not what this dance is about. Okay, the couple motifs that you'll see again here. And every time they lunge, they have these arms, and they look at each other. 2 more spatial patterns. They're common in classical ballet. The weaving pattern, where they go in and out of each other, and then what we call a pinwheel, where you have lines. They have to keep a straight line as they rotate. And of course, the most important thing, that they look like they're dancing with their friends. All right, thank you, dancers. I choreographed another dance for the student company last year that came about really differently. Because instead of the company giving me all these restrictions, I could do whatever I wanted, and that's usually pretty fun. So I had this idea. I wanted to do a duet, and I wanted them to be really close, like on top of each other, kind of intertwined, and maybe do some really like contortion-y movement and maybe really sharp and like robotic movement. I wanted it to be kind of weird and avant-garde. But of the few limitations that I had, I knew I was working with kids. And while kids can be really weird in their own right, I didn't think they could do this like weird avant-garde dance idea that I had. So I had to shift my idea. In order to do that, I went back to the music. So I listened to different songs, and fortunately, I did find a song that inspired me and allowed me to shift my idea. You can see they're not intertwined. They're not even touching, but they're staying this really close proximity and this flat orientation. So this really upright style was inspired by this style of classical contemporary ballet that came out in the 90s. It was this upright European style with very like conservative arm movements. It's something that I grew up with. I didn't get too weird, but I think I did some sort of unexpected things with the skirts. All right. Skipping ahead just a little bit, because again, I just want to show you a couple more examples of how my idea shifted. Now they get to touch. Really moving in sync with each other and not necessarily contortion-y, but showing off a little bit of flexibility. Now this section, I don't know if you can really call this robotic, but in this dance, this is as robotic as I got. Really clipped and precise movements, and they really had to stay together for it to be effective. And you know my inspiration comes from the music. You might recognize this song. It's by Bach, and there are a lot of different recordings. This recording's from around 1950. So it has that old-fashioned grainy sound. So that really inspired the stylization and the costumes. Good job, thanks, ladies. So I hope in watching these and hearing about the restrictions that I had, you're starting to understand that no matter what the restrictions are, something worthwhile is going to come out of it. In fact, sometimes the more restrictions you have, the more creative and incredible the outcome can be. One interesting thing about dance is that we have to work with the limitations of the human body. We also have to work with the limitations of our physical environment, and then all of our dance training, our years of dance training. So then to be creative, we take this tightly packed box of being highly trained and all of our experiences and technique, and we open it up. The piece I created for the local modern dance company, so this is the adult company that I'm a part of, we had some unusual restrictions. We were brainstorming ideas for the show, and we were thinking that we should do something that is in really confined spaces, so small dances. And so one of the dancers had this idea that we should dance on a chair or with a chair, because that's really confined. So wouldn't you know it, the dance studio where we rehearse has these nice, sturdy metal stools. So I was going to use them. But as you can probably imagine, these stools come with a lot of restrictions. If we're going to dance on the stool, we're going to be, elevated off the ground. We're not really going to be able to move around. If we're elevated, we're also going to change our visual perception of our environments. We also have to be really seriously careful about not falling off the stool, which probably means we can't do much with our lower bodies. And this is just 1 square foot of space. The other main restriction that we had if we were going to be elevated on these stools and we wanted to look really, really long and high, and of course, very, very cool, we had these floor-length skirts made. So as you can imagine, this is going to really severely restrict movement in our lower bodies. So we were going to keep our movement mostly in our upper bodies. So that was going to be hard for me. As you saw some examples of, I tend to have the dancers move around the stage while they're dancing. But as a creative person, I knew I had to do this project and not skip it just because it seemed difficult. So remember, the more restrictions you have, the more incredible the outcome can be.